Hi, my name is Gabriel Shanley. My dad is Brian James Shanley. He is a minister, and he is like a general who is training an army of Christian soldiers so he can lead them into battle. He is the voice of a new generation of Christians, and he is the leader of a new Christian revolution. His is a voice they hope you never hear.
Hello everyone, greetings and welcome to one of the most exciting, one of the fastest growing radio talk shows today, a show that boldly goes where very few other shows even think about going, a show that delivers raw, uncompromising and true commentary on a vast range of issues, from religion to politics to entertainment. We also deal with science, sports, economic, many other areas of our daily experience. I'd like to welcome you to the Saturday, January the 30th, 2010 edition of Ground Zero. I'm your host, Dr. Brian James Shanley. I'd like to wish everyone under the sound of my voice a very happy New Year. You need to thank and praise God for the gift of an extension of your life. You see, prior to this last January the 1st, 2010 is a year that you've never seen before. We live in a world where anything can happen at any moment. For any reason or for no reason at all, human life is snuffed out routinely on a daily basis. You don't believe me? Just look at the news tonight. What you'll find is that a lot of people woke up this morning just like you did, had plans for the day just like you did, looked forward to the promise and the possibilities of a new day just like you did. They ran into unforeseen circumstances during the course of today that they never saw coming, and those events have prevented them from seeing and experiencing this very moment. While you sit at your radio or your computer or however you're listening to this, I want you to think about the fact that someone else somewhere is laying on the table of the coroner. Friend, that could have been you, but you're alive. You're here. You've been furnished with a little extra time on the playing field. So I got to hit you with the question. I got to challenge you. What are you going to do with it? And I got to also ask you, does that additional time belong to you, or does it belong to the God who graciously extended it to you? I'm not Jack Handy, but these are still deep thoughts. We'd like to deal with this kind of stuff and more here on Ground Zero. Now, why don't you keep up your end of this conversation? Shoot us a listener email on bjshanley@hotmail.com. That's B as in boy, J as in James, Shanley, S-H-A-N, like Nancy, L-E-Y, @hotmail.com. So bjshanley@hotmail.com. Or drop us a listener voicemail on 612-867-0699. That is 612-867-0699. Now, we love to hear what you think. Your opinion means everything.
Let's dance, let's shout, shake your body down to the ground. Let's dance, let's shout, shake your body down to the ground.
Man, if the music doesn't hit you the way that it hits me, then I've got to declare that there's something wrong with you. Anyway, so it's 2010, and as I sit back here, I can remember a time when I was a little boy, sometime around, 1981, 1982 maybe, trying to figure out how I was going to ride this bike without the training wheels. Or 1985, I can remember playing football with the neighborhood kids, trying to be like Walter Payton. Now, way back then, from that time period, when you heard phrases like the year 2000 or the year 2010, a lot of things came to your mind. You thought of some faraway, distant time period that may or may never even come. You thought about the Jetsons. You thought about flying cars. You thought about futuristic technology, kind of like what you saw, in science fiction movies. You remember the movies? 2001, A Space Odyssey. What was the other one? 2010, the year we made contact. Ain't that now? What are we making contact with? They made you think that huge advances in space exploration were coming. I remember in first grade, there was a lot of talk at that time of one day colonizing the moon. That was pretty big back then. And when you went to school, you heard the teachers, they told you that in this far-off, distant time period called the 21st century, there was going to be great progress for humankind. The TV told us that by then, man was going to evolve and change and become this love-filled creature who is devoted to charity and helping others and who doesn't commit crimes against his fellow man. through the application of science as well as the removal of any public references to superstition or to the sacred, man was ultimately going to solve all of his problems and cure all of his diseases. Man was supposed to become so civilized that he was going to be able to non-violently resolve all conflicts. Hence, of course, there'd be no more need for war. So wars would become a thing of the past. I remember them talking about all the nuclear weapons were going to be either thrown into the ocean, disarmed, or launched into space. All the hungry were going to be fed. The poor were going to be raised up out of poverty. And of course, this sounds like a beautiful world, doesn't it? It sounds like a gorgeous vision. It sounds like a dream. And it really sounds good to you when you're less than 10 years old, when you're just a kid. But I'll tell you what, now as I sit here, and I look out this window at my city, and I see that 2010 is here, you know, I think about how has it really all worked out. There's more war, there's more poverty, there's more disease, more oppression, more violence, more brutality, and more instability and fear now than at any other point in human history. They predicted things were going to get better, but things have gotten worse. They told us that man was going to move forward, but man is heading backwards. In these uncertain and scary times, you can put your trust in the company that you work for, but if they're able to save a few bucks by doing it, you know full well that they'd cut you from the payroll tomorrow, and it wouldn't bother them in the least. You could always put your trust in your family or your friends, but you know, they're only human beings, able to mess up, able to make mistakes, able to let you down when you need the most, able to abandon you during your darkest hour. You could put your trust in the government, but secular human governments often, because they're filled with human beings that run them, they often become corrupted. They can adopt rules and enact laws that ultimately enslave people, that rob them of their dignity, and that trample on their rights. To be honest, there's nothing and there's no one that you can rely upon that's of this world, that's 100% reliable, that's absolutely risk-free, that's guaranteed not to leave you stranded. As I open my hand right now, and I count 5 fingers, and each of those 5 fingers, let's just say they represent one of my 5 best friends, my inner circle. I'm talking about people who have been in my house, who have been around my kids. I gotta be totally honest here. I'd be lying if I didn't admit that each and every one of them, at some time or another, now even though it was only for a season, and things have been healed again since then, each one has said or done something that I have viewed as a crime against our friendship. I felt abandoned, I felt misunderstood, I felt minimized, I felt stabbed in the back by each one of them at some time or another. And like I said, even if it was just for a moment, and it's not reflective of the healed and restored friendship that we enjoy today, my main point is that, you know what, we're all human. We all screw up. We all fail each other's expectations all the time. I don't know about you, but I'm darn good at making mistakes. And when I screw up, I don't just mess around with it. I do it like an expert. I don't make little mistakes. I make gross whoppers. You see, we all share a common ancestor named Adam. And from him, we inherited tendencies in the directions of error, tendencies in the direction of evil and of sin, and of making wrong choices. We inherited a preference towards error and towards evil and towards sin and towards making the wrong choices. Let me hit you with the question. You ever wonder why it's hard to do the right thing? Why it's hard to follow the rules? Why it's hard to stay away from bad things? Why does it feel like a fight? Why does it feel like a struggle? You'd think that doing right and handling business would just come naturally, but it doesn't. You ever notice that? To do the right thing, it's really hard. Why is that? When we see the high that a drug offers, where are we drawn towards it? When we're flipping through channels and we see some half-naked young lady, why does it always take us a minute before we take our eyes off her and turn the channel? When you see a way to make a few extra dollars in a dishonest way, and it's easy, and there's no possibility of getting caught, and you can get away with it, why does every fiber of your being pull you in the direction of getting involved? Why do you think of it as an opportunity? Why does doing bad things feel so natural. Secular humanism is going to tell you that man is essentially good, and doing good and making right choices are part of his nature. But the Christian points out the biblical view of anthropology, which tells us, you know what, man has totally fallen into a condition of depravity, and that doing wrong and making wrong choices are actually part of his nature. So when you're trying to do right, you're actually fighting against your own nature, and that's why it's a struggle. So you have humanism on one hand, Christianity on the other, and of their two views of reality, which one seems more like reality? And which one seems more like fantasy? Which one seems more mystical and more superstitious? You live in this world. You live in a human body with a human mind and a human conscience. So be honest with yourself. Which one tells you the true story about what it's like to live here? Which one corresponds with reality? The one that made man and that created man has told us accurately all about man. The times in which we live are not getting any easier. They're not getting any more comfortable. So it's time to stop trusting in man or in organizations or systems created by man's mind. These things are going to knock you flat on your face every time. It's time to put your trust in the God who will never leave or forsake all those who are His. Now all those who are not His, they're going to be on their own. And that's no place to be. People who reject God, people who put their trust in people or things of this earth, if you've talked to one of them, you've talked to them all. I don't know every individual, but I do know the mentality. Whatever non-Christian path they choose to substitute in there in Christianity's place, they all end up in the same place. They all take you to the same end destination, and the ending is not going to be pretty. A lot of us make promises to ourselves about a new start. I'm going back to church after I get married, or I'm going to give the Bible a fair shot when I turn 35, or you know what, I'm going to return to Bible study after my baby is born. My target date is January 1st of 1993, or January 1st, 1997 for sure. I'm going to dedicate my life to God in the year 2000. A lot of you know exactly what I'm talking about. You've set and you've blown a lot of goals and a lot of target dates in which you knew that, you know what, I'm going to commit myself to the truth, at least studying it, at least seeing what it's all about. Some people push it back and push it back and push it back to the point that they run out of time, and they let their whole life go by, and it's been all about everything other than the truth. Listening to this show, you may not agree with everything, but you know what? It can be a first step on a new journey. Yes, this is Dr. Brian James Shanley, and you're listening to Ground Zero on this Saturday, January the 30th, 2010. I want to welcome you to the newest radio talk show out there as we seek to understand the times in which we live so that we can make decisions about where we're going to stand, because you got to stand somewhere about the issues of our day. We're interested in hearing your feedback in terms of what we're covering and how we're doing in covering it. Shoot us a listener email on bjshanley@hotmail.com. That's B as in boy, J as in James, Shanley, S-H-A-N like Nancy, L-E-Y @hotmail.com. So bjshanley@hotmail.com, or drop us a listener voicemail on 612-867-0699. Again, 612-867-0699. Now, I'm no fan of MSNBC, but I still tune in once in a while. As much as I violently disagree with Ed Schultz, as much as I disagree with Keith Olbermann, I like their personalities. I think they're funny, and I think they're goofy, and sometimes, I feel that you got to get two sides of an issue. I can't disagree with someone when I've never taken time to understand where they're coming from. So I do listen to the show.
Anything that I would not do without you. Yeah, baby, without you.
There's a lot of people that walk around stating how much they disagree with a position out there, be it religious, be it political, be it whatever, but they've never read 2 pages of discussion coming from the other side. I have some in-laws that are Jesus-only, apostolic, oneness Pentecostals. Yet if you ask them about the Trinity, all they've read is anti-Trinitarian literature authored by their own so-called scholars. And they've never read anything from the other side. You can't say you've made an informed decision about anything unless you've studied both sides of the issue. So I know there's people under the sound of my voice right now who disagree with everything I stand for, but at the very least you need to be applauded for your courage to hear another side. This is how people come to understandings. This is how sometimes people become educated. I can't tell you between now and the time I was young how many positions I've made changes on because I've taken the time to research both sides of the issue. And I've taken second looks at my own positions and realized that they weren't as solid as I once thought. This is called growth. But if you only read certain people who agree with where you're already at, and you don't venture outside of that sphere and check out other stuff, then you've stopped growing. And the old saying goes, if you're not growing, you're dying. So yeah, I listen to some of the people on MSNBC. There always exists the outside possibility, long shot, that something intelligent could be said, or whatever. I leave room open for the miracle that Keith Olbermann might say something intelligent, or that Ed Schultz might bring in some insight that I've never heard of before. The lesbian-looking chick with the short hair, what's her name, Rachel, is it Maddow or Maddow or whatever? She's just too out there for me. And she always has guests on there. There's a lack of diversity. The secular humanist or the atheist, they think diversity has to do with external appearance or behaviors. So, for example, they'll have people sitting around a table. You've got a white man and a black man and a Chinese man and a Hispanic man and a gay man. You've got some women in there. You've got a guy in a wheelchair or whatever. And they say, we've got a diverse panel. I'm sorry, but it's not diverse if all the people sitting around that table think the same way. That's not what diversity is. Diversity is multiple ideas. There's no room in their worldview for a rational discussion with opposing viewpoints. The moment that you beat them in a debate or that you present them with questions for which they have no answer, their response is to call you names. What they do is they pull these things out of their behind and they call you names. And so the rest of the discussion has to do with Brian Shanley hates cats. Brian Shanley's allergic to fish or whatever. And next thing you know, you're discussing a personality, and the central issues that were originally the focus of the discussion are gone. That's their tactic. Now, I want to play you a clip. Earlier this month, Keith Olbermann had a show, and he had a guest. I'm not going to set it up because I don't want to bias your hearing of it in any way. I want you to hear it from their own mouths in its context. It's long because I don't want to be accused of only playing a clip and being selective or something like that. I remember one time I played a quote from Creflo Dollar, and the lady said, you're taking it out of context. So I played the whole tape for her. And then she said, I've heard you do impressions, Brian. I know that's you doing an impression of Creflo Dollar. I can do a mean Creflo Dollar, and I can do a good Kenneth Copeland, and I can do some impressions, but that was Creflo Dollar's tape. Once I showed it to her with the print on it, then she said, well, he'd been traveling a lot, so he must have been very tired. There's always an excuse, you see. No one's ever responsible for anything they say. But it's always the fault of the person that points it out. This really happened sometime earlier this month, January 2010. I don't know the exact date. I just remember watching it. I'm going to play you the whole discussion. May nobody say that I took it out of context.
Yeah, but we got Britt Hume at 6 o'clock. He's not partisan. He's not selling anything. He's not proselytizing. Oops.
Tiger Woods will recover as a golfer. Whether he can recover as a person, I think is a very open question, and it's a tragic situation with him. I think he's lost his family. It's not clear to me that whether he'll be able to have a relationship with his children, but the Tiger Tiger Woods, it emerges once the news value dies out of this scandal. The extent to which he can recover, it seems to me, depends on his faith. He's said to be a Buddhist. I don't think that faith offers the kind of forgiveness and redemption that is offered by the Christian faith. So my message to Tiger would be, Tiger, turn to the Christian faith, and you can make a total recovery and be a great example to the world.
Wow! Hume's attempt to inject religion into a discussion of the Woods mess and then setting one religion as superior and more forgiving to another even got a mention from Don Imus on the Fox Out of Business channel, quoting, "Well, we checked this morning, and unfortunately, or perhaps fortunately if you're a Buddhist, there is a path to recovery and redemption," right? Well, yes, there is. The idea of redemption, nirvana under Buddhism, is achieving the state of being freed from greed, hate, and delusion. Let's bring in activist Dan Savage, author of The Commitment, Love, Sex, Marriage, and My Family. Dan, good evening.
Good evening, Keith.
Wow, and the brakes of political correctness are applied on you by Don Imus. You're in trouble, but let me start with the premise. Being Christian is the best religion for adulterers because you can be forgiven, and we have many fine examples of that, I suppose.
We do. Mark Sanford, John Ensign, David Vitter. What's hilarious about it is there's Britt Hume on Fox News suggesting that people should be Christians or adulterous, straight men should be Christians, not because Jesus is the way and the light, not because Jesus is the Son of God, not because it is the one true religion, but because it offers the best deal. It gives you the get out of adultery free card that other religions just can't. That seems like an insult to Christianity, my mother would point out.
But isn't this the classic thing that your mother probably also pointed out to you about never discussing religion in public? I mean, you can discuss religion in public. It's like this, you're not supposed to do it. This crosses that principle. Keep religious advocacy out of public life, since, the worst examples of that are jihadists, not to mention, guys who don't know their own religions or somebody else's religion, like Britt Hume.
What's really telling, though, is just as, I'm not comparing the American religious right to jihadists. They throw rhetorical bombs, the other guys throw real bombs. There's a big difference. But whenever we have a discussion in our country about jihadism and radical Muslims, you always hear, where are the moderate voices? Where are the moderate Muslims? Why don't they speak up? Where are the moderate, liberal, progressive Christians when something like this happens? Why don't they speak up in defense of their own faith? American Christianity has been hijacked by the lunatics, by the Pat Robertsons, and by the Phelps family, by the Gary Bowers, and by people like Britt Hume. And it's an insult to Christianity. It's an insult to Christians. I'm not a Christian. I was a seminarian once upon a time. But I'd like to hear from moderate Christians, not just radical sex advice columnist faggots about this. I'd like to hear them speak up.
WWJDIHS, which is What Would Jesus Do If He Strayed? Beyond the mere advocacy of religion in public life, this notion that we can counter religious fundamentalists who, as you know, aptly are different from religious fundamentalists here. They want to blow us up, but somehow we can defend ourselves with our own vigorous religion. Is this sort of Peter Pan quality here? If we all just think hard enough, our God can beat up their God?
That has been going on, and that needs to be checked. General Boykin, who was one of the generals in charge of the invasion of Iraq, gave a speech where he said, our God is bigger than their God. And we've got to stop. We've got to de-escalate this rhetoric and the rhetorical war, pitting one religion against another religion, particularly as inoffensive a religion as Buddhism.
Yes, we haven't heard any threats from radical Buddhists lately in this country.
There are no Buddhists with bombs in their underpants on airplanes, I don't think.
I'm going to avoid a bomb in the underwear joke about Tiger Woods, for God's sakes, but is it not in the interest of people of faith to avoid this kind of public proselytizing? I mean, the smart ones get that it just makes them look bad, no matter what the thought might be.
Smart people of faith set an example through their lives. They don't go on Fox News and bloviate and lecture other people and hector people. Britt Hume is on his second marriage. Tiger Woods is on his first. Britt Hume really isn't in a position to be lecturing Tiger Woods about marriage or about the one true path or about the deal that Christianity offers adulterous men.
Well, I'm going to assume this is true. By the way, I haven't done any research on it, but I don't think Britt Hume used to be a Buddhist who then converted to some Christian faith and found this path already. But if he did, and he is actually speaking from experience, I guess we owe him an apology, but I tend to doubt it.
I doubt it too, very highly.
Dan Savage, author of The Commitment. Great thanks for your time tonight, Dan.
Thank you for having me, Keith.
All right, was that clip long? Yes, it was long, but I warned you ahead of time that I was going to play the whole thing. You understand the reason that I am always so stressful about getting multiple sides of an issue is because if all you ever watched for news and for commentary about religion and about politics and sports and all of the issues of our day, if all you watched was MSNBC or CNN or just mainstream media, unfortunately that's about as intelligent of a discussion as you're going to get. There's a classic rule when reading or listening to somebody's thoughts, and that rule is simply this: when an author or a speaker uses a communication tool in either their writing or their speaking, but doesn't bother to either define the tool or explain why they're using it, it's because they're operating under the assumption that the intended audience already understands and agrees with its use. In other words, they're using a communication tool that they assume their listeners or their viewers would understand well enough and agree with strongly enough that it would be received as helpful and insightful. The first voice you heard in the clip is that of Keith Olbermann, host of the cable TV show Countdown on MSNBC. It routinely gets its butt kicked in the ratings. But I want you to notice he's utilizing the communication tool of sarcasm. In other words, using a mocking voice and then saying something that you disagree with in order to make it sound like a joke, something that needs to be laughed at. And of course, the absence of an explanation about why it's funny or what makes it silly means only one thing: no explanation is needed. How come? Because his viewing audience in his mind should already have their minds filled with the preconceived ideas necessary to view the comments as funny and as silly. He assumes that the regular viewer of his show has already been sufficiently trained and filled with the right thoughts about how to interpret such things. Now, in the mocking tone, Keith sarcastically says, "Yeah, but we've got Brit Hume at 6 o'clock. He's not partisan. He's not selling anything. He's not proselytizing. Oops."
Yeah, but we got Brit Hume at 6 o'clock. He's not partisan. He's not selling anything. He's not proselytizing. Oops.
Now, Brit Hume, he's a TV personality affiliated with Fox News. Keith is describing Brit in a mocking way. His use of sarcasm, as he says of Brit, "He's not partisan,"
He's not partisan.
carries within it an underlying presupposition that being partisan is a bad thing. But our current president, Barack Hussein Obama, it needs to be pointed out that he's without a doubt the chief executive of the most partisan administration that this nation has ever seen. But Olbermann, he's what we call a lapdog. You understand? He's a bought and sold communication piece. All he does is flaps his lips and puts out whatever the administration wants the people to think. So Olbermann is never going to criticize the act of being partisan to people that he likes, as long as the partisan politician holds to the right views on the issues. And what are the right views on the issues in his eyes and in the eyes of his viewers? The positions that his show takes. If you agree with it in a partisan way, he's going to look the other way. But if you're partisan for the other side, you're the biggest evil piece of trash in the world. Now, his use of sarcasm, as he says of Brit, "He's not selling anything."
He's not selling anything.
What does that presuppose? That a TV personality selling or endorsing a product, this is a negative enterprise. This is a negative activity to get in. This is a bad thing. But it needs to be pointed out that Olbermann himself does commercials. You ever see him on those Orbitz commercials? But I guess the act of salesmanship or being a paid spokesman for a product, it's okay only for him. Everyone else who does it is evil. I guess people who do it that agree with the position of his show are good. But if you are a paid spokesperson and you hold the views that his show does not communicate, then once again you're someone to be mocked and made fun of. Using sarcasm to say "he's not selling anything,"
He's not selling anything.
means that you view TV personalities either selling or endorsing products as a bad thing. But here's another thing that he fails to understand about that. The money in your pocket is yours. You worked for it. You sacrificed for it. You suffered for it. It's yours. It's the fruit of your mind. It's the fruit of your labor. And when you lay it down in exchange for TV or radio time or whatever, that's your time. You bought it with the fruit of your labor. Nobody else bought it. And since you bought it, you also bought the right to do with it whatever you want. You can talk about the Smurfs if you want to. You can play a harmonica. you can have a moment of silence, and you darn sure can give a brief plug regarding a product out there that you believe would benefit your audience to know exists. That right is yours. And it's not for Olbermann to attack. It's not for him to mock. Who is he to come against your rights? I don't understand this guy. His whole way of thinking is very scary. He doesn't believe in the most basic of God-given rights. But he's Keith, and therefore, since he's on MSNBC and he's one of their lead anchors, then everyone should listen to him. And because he is who he is, he's going to instruct us about what broadcasting is all about. And so as he moves on in his sarcastic list of don'ts, he says of Britt, he's not proselytizing. Oops.
He's not proselytizing. Oops.
Now, we've already established that his use of argumentum ad ridiculum regarding partisanship,
He's not partisan.
and salesmanship,
He's not selling anything.
these are very revealing about his underlying presuppositions. And now we've gotten to proselytizing, which is essentially exercising freedom of religion and freedom of speech in order to speak your mind and speak your heart on the subject of religion, without regard to what your religion is. You have that right under our Constitution. Communicating your views, exchanging information, listening to other views out there, and attempting to persuade people to come to your side of the discussion. This is what our country was built on, but in his mind it's very bad.
He's not proselytizing. Oops.
Olbermann has shown what we would call the three commandments. Thou shalt not believe in your political views with any strength or any passion, nor be unwilling to compromise your positions.
Partisan.
Unless, of course, you're a political leftist, then you're exempt. Thou shalt neither be a paid spokesperson for a product, nor use the time you purchase on TV or radio to give a mention of a product's existence.
Selling anything.
Unless, of course, you're a progressive who agrees with him, then you're exempt from this commandment. And now we arrive at thou shalt not publicly discuss any religion as being true in the absolute sense.
Proselytizing.
Unless, of course, you're a religious leftist who believes that no religion is more true or more false than any other. If you're a one-world multiculturalist who sees all religions as different paths towards the same place, great, then you're exempt. This is why his show always has been and always will be hypocritical at its very core. Do I like it? In a way, yeah, I do. Is it kind of entertaining? Is his sense of humor kind of goofy? Yeah, I get a kick out of it sometimes. It gives me some laughs. But what I don't like is that in the name of it's a cardinal sin to sell things, he sells stuff. In the name of it's a cardinal sin to be partisan, he's clearly, in his commentary anyway, coming from a very strongly held political position, and he delivers it in a very uncompromising and partisan way. In the name of it's a cardinal sin to speak about religion publicly, he goes on to have a public discussion about religion in that very segment. So it's very difficult to take the man seriously as a broadcast journalist, as everything he claims to stand for, he doesn't even believe in those things enough to keep himself. But anyways, he was doing all of that before he would even air the commentary, because it was his goal to prepare and bias his audience so that they would hear Britt Hume and have their mind made up from before they even heard one word, that they were about to hear at least one of the three commandments broken.
Partisan. Selling anything. Proselytizing.
Britt Hume never stood a chance in the sight of anyone who believes Olbermann to be an authoritative commentator. You're asking why I just broke in with the musical interlude? Very simple. Some research I did on the subject of the human attention span has led me to believe that I've got to change it up just to keep you awake. I don't want you to miss out on this important information that we're going through, but I know that listening to my high-pitched Mickey Mouse squeaky voice will bore someone to tears. And how do I know this? Because I'm starting to lose my own attention, and I'm the one doing this. You got to stay with me, because this is vital stuff. Christians, if you're out there and you're listening, the world is being taught and instructed how to view and treat you. And I'm just trying to give you an example. What I'm trying to do is train your antenna so that you can detect these kind of things for yourself. So anyways, in this clip we have the brilliant Keith Olbermann. He cuts over to Britt Hume And Britt, he's engaged in a discussion of Tiger Woods and the recent gossip regarding the discovery and making public of the fact that he's committed adultery on his wife multiple times with multiple women in multiple cities all over the world, and that his family life is in a rough place right now. And Britt, I thought, was really compassionate. He just basically says, look, Tiger Woods is going to recover as a golfer. Whether he can recover as a person, I think, is a very open question, and it's a tragic situation with him. I think he's lost his family. It's not clear to me whether he'll be able to have a relationship with his children, but the Tiger Woods that emerges, once the news value dies out of this scandal, the extent to which he can recover, it seems, depends on his faith. He's said to be a Buddhist. I don't think that faith offers the kind of forgiveness and redemption that is offered by the Christian faith. So my message to Tiger would be, Tiger, turn to the Christian faith, and you can make a total recovery and be a great example to the world.
Tiger Woods will recover as a golfer. Whether he can recover as a person, I think, is a very open question, and it's a tragic situation with him. I think he's lost his family. It's not clear to me that whether he'll be able to have a relationship with his children. But the Tiger Woods that emerges once the news value dies out of this scandal, the extent to which he can recover, it seems to me, depends on his faith. He's said to be a Buddhist. I don't think that faith offers the kind of forgiveness and redemption that is offered by the Christian faith. So my message to Tiger would be, Tiger, turn to the Christian faith, and you can make a total recovery and be a great example to the world.
So analyzing Britt here, he first talks about Tiger recovering as a golfer, as a pro. Is he still going to be able to be the draw that puts butts in the seats? Is he still going to get the TV ratings? Yes. There's a million athletes and entertainers that have done far worse than this, and with the passage of time, their audience did move on. And the scandal that they were dealing with ultimately became a footnote of their overall career and their overall life story. If R. Kelly can statutorily rape a young lady and be stupid enough to videotape it, and then they find child pornography on his computer, and he can have a career afterwards and go multi-platinum when he puts out an album, then surely Tiger Woods can recover from this. But Britt, the interesting thing about him is he doesn't stop at Tiger the athlete recovering. He talks about Tiger the husband recovering, Tiger the father recovering. At least he sees Tiger as a human being with more to him than being a golfer. This is a devastating event to live through. ESPN and all these other stations, they're not talking about Tiger the whole man recovering from this. They only care about him in the same way that a ringmaster cares about a circus animal. They don't want the animal to stop performing at a time when the animal is still in its prime, still young enough, still famous enough to be able to rake in money for them by entertaining the rich spectators. The thing about Britt is that he sees Tiger as more than a product to be marketed. He sees Tiger as a human being made in the image of God, and to be honest, I respect Britt for that a great deal. And so what he's really saying here is that after the news media and the press have moved on past this and on to the next big story, it's still going to be part of Tiger's life. He's still going to have to confront it. He's still going to have to deal with it. He's still going to have to get it behind him and behind his family. Now, Britt's commentary, the reason why I agree with it is because it seems very clear that he understands the difference between repenting to and being forgiven by man, and repenting to and being forgiven by God. Tiger may apologize to his wife, and he may apologize to his kids. You ask yourself, why does he apologize to his kids? A lot of men don't understand this. But when you cheat on your wife, you're also betraying the very kids that she once held for you. It's a crime against them. It's a crime against the whole family. So reconciliation with the people you hurt has to be done. That's one thing. But there also needs to be reconciliation with God. And Britt here has rightly pointed out that whether or not Tiger can make a full recovery from this, it does depend upon his faith.
The extent to which he can recover, it seems to me, depends on his faith.
You see, God has offered humankind grace. He's offered humankind mercy. He's offered us forgiveness, stuff we don't even deserve. But He's given us the catch. It's only available through one method. It's only available in one way, and that is the death, the burial, and the resurrection of Jesus Christ, God the Son. But humankind, you see, we're quite rebellious. We're pretty disobedient people. We're arrogant, and we have down through the centuries so severely rejected this method of salvation that we've created our own methods. We've devised our own religions. And if you look at the theology and the primary source documents that systematize and define these religions, what you'll see that they all have in common is they attack all that God has said and all that He has commanded. We're like an angry 6-year-old that has behavior problems. We've imagined that we can disobey direct orders and we can disobey rules that have been set by our parent. And yet, even in our own rebelliousness, we somehow have the nerve to expect happy results in the end. This way of thinking, it boggles the mind. It borders on mental illness. It's insane. And yes, Buddhism is one of those rebellious, disobedient, and, might I add, theologically inaccurate inventions that come straight out of the mind and the heart of a person who knows what God has said, but gave him a big middle finger and said, forget you, forget the cross, forget what you've said. I'm going to get to heaven on my own, by my own way and by my own power. So Britt pointed out that Tiger's a Buddhist.
He's said to be a Buddhist.
Now the very next sentence that he speaks, it needs to be analyzed and broken down very carefully.
I don't think that faith offers the kind of forgiveness and redemption that is offered by the Christian faith.
I don't think that faith offers the kind of forgiveness and redemption that is offered by the Christian faith. Key words to look at, the kind of.
The kind of.
If you have Nikes and I have Reeboks and I say you don't have the kind of shoes I have, am I saying that you have no shoes on at all? Absolutely not. So then answer me this question. Where does Olbermann get off changing what Hume has said, saying that Britt tried to accuse Buddhism of offering no way or no path at all? When it comes to interpreting what people are saying, breaking down the meaning of words, and putting it into paraphrase, Olbermann is either very incompetent or very dishonest. Siddhartha Gautama was a historical figure. He was a Hindu who one day just took off. He abandoned his wife and his children to seek self-enlightenment. Now, he never called himself Buddha. So if you walked up to him in the marketplace and said, hey, Buddha, how's it going? What's up? He'd look around wondering who the heck you were talking to. Buddha means the enlightened one, and it's a title that was given to him by others around 1,000 years after he died. He never lived to see it. He never claimed it for himself. But after abandoning his family and sitting under a tree in the lotus position, he achieved ultimate enlightenment. And so you're probably thinking to yourself, great, any enlightened person would realize that he screwed up, and he'd return home to his family, and he'd be a husband, and he'd be a father. True enlightenment would obviously motivate a man to be just that, be a freaking man. Take care of business, take care of your home and your family. Not the enlightenment of Buddhism, I'm sorry to disappoint you. His enlightenment said that pain and suffering, you see, they're caused by attachments. You want to get rid of pain and suffering in your life? Distance yourself. Don't be attached. Don't care. Don't give a crap. You're sad that your son was killed? Well, your pain is actually being caused by your attachment to your son. Disconnect yourself from him. Let go of him. Then you won't be grieving anymore. I got to tell you the truth. I could teach you an entire course on Buddhism and the pure selfishness that it requires of its followers. But that's for another time. In the meanwhile, I want you to check something out. Mr. Buddha abandons his family to seek selfishness and enlightenment. Tiger Woods abandons his family to seek selfishness and enlightenment. Mr. Buddha sits under a tree in the lotus position. Tiger Woods lays under a bunch of women in all kinds of positions. Tiger's adultery is nothing more than his being a faithful follower and practicer of Buddhism in the exact same way as the founder of the religion.
When you walk into the light, and we begin to rise, steady, steady rocking all night long, and we begin to rise, steady, rocking till the break of dawn.
If even on the most basic or elementary of levels you're familiar with Buddhism's so-called Four Noble Truths or its Eightfold Path or any of the primary reference works it has produced, then you'll realize several things right away. First of all, Siddhartha never claimed to be a god, never claimed to be divine, never requested worship. Those who worship their Buddha statue are in error. They've deviated from what the founder of their religion taught. He said that there is no God. There's no supreme, there's no personal being. There is, however, a great blob in the sky, composed of energy that, if we're good enough, if we free ourselves from all of our attachments to the things inside of the matrix that we call the material world, we can hopefully one day break down, become energy ourselves, and become absorbed into it. We can be at one with it. That is ultimate reality. The material world is fake. It's a dream. We want to wake up from this dream into the real world, outside of this matrix, outside of the non-existent material world. That is the end goal of Buddhism. Now, during your time inside of this matrix, while you're stuck here in the flesh and blood, sticks and stones, concrete world composed of matter, inside of the real world that you and I live in every day, per the teachings of Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, if you just meditate, if you just sit, if you just stand, if you just stretch into the right yoga positions and think the correct positive thoughts, fill your head with the correct positive images, you can have access to this great cosmic blob in the sky. Its energy Hold on. Access to this great cosmic blob in the sky. Its energy can give you superpowers that are not available to less enlightened folks. And you can use those powers to manipulate what goes on inside of this material world. But you've got to be careful, because this energy field is composed of two sides equally. There's a good side and there's a bad side. Positive thoughts and positive speech that you make get the good side of the force acting for you in a positive way. But negative thoughts and negative speech that you make, they get the bad side of the force acting against you in a negative way. Hinduism is the mother. That's why writers like Madame Blavatsky call the birthplace of Hinduism Mother India. Then, of course, Buddhism, Taoism, Shintoism, self-help, self-esteem, the human potential movement, Christian Science, New Age spiritualism, prosperity theology, the religion of the Star Wars movies, many of the philosophies and ideas that are common in many of the martial arts, positive thinking, positive speaking, theosophy. All of these are the babies that come from Mother India and from her Hinduism. My main point behind this brief history and this theology lesson is basically this. When Britt Hume states that this path does not offer the same kind of forgiveness and redemption that is offered by the Christian faith,
I don't think that faith offers the kind of forgiveness and redemption that is offered by the Christian faith.
he's actually dead on accurate. In Buddhism, there's no forgiveness and there's no redemption needed. Why not? Because sin doesn't even exist. Why doesn't sin exist? Because there's no God who's offended by our bad deeds. How can an impersonal field of energy be hurt? How can it be offended? How can it be grieved? How can it be disobeyed? How can it be sinned against? It can't be done. So there is no sin. Thus, no need of forgiveness, no need of redemption. The only need you have is to so indoctrinate yourself with the teachings of Buddhism that you experience freedom from the material world in its most complete way, to exist apart from it as energy inside of the nirvana energy field, to become part of that field yourself. How do you get there? Through a spiritual law of Hinduism, which is called karma. I wish I had Boy George right now, because I'd play Karma Chameleon for you. Karma is a process by which you live multiple lives as multiple people. You can also live as an animal, depending on how you acted in a previous life. You're reincarnated again and again. Do you ever run out of lives? Nope. It's not Pac-Man, it's not Mario Brothers. You get as many lives as it takes. You never run out. The cosmic blob of energy is going to be waiting for you. Why are you broke in this life? Because in a previous life, you were probably greedy. Why are you fat and full of health problems in this life? Because in a previous life, you probably couldn't disconnect yourself or free yourself from your attachment to butter or to Twinkies or whatever. Each life, you can take a few steps backwards if you mess up, or a few steps forwards if you make progress. There's no hell to be afraid of. There's no God to stand before. There's no judgment that's going to happen. The distributor of your various situations and your fortunes, it's an impersonal law. It's karma. There's good karma and there's bad karma. But no matter where you're at in your karma, you must work it out. You must cultivate it. To get to the enlightenment, you've got to get it right at some point and in some life. Today we have celebrities and we have professional athletes and we have educators in the public school system and the universities. They throw around the term karma like it's as American as apple pie, like it's normal, but they're ignorant. Do you ever wonder why these philosophies produce conquered and victimized pacifistic people? I'll stand here while you kick my butt, shoot my family, and burn my country down. I won't resist. Why not? One word, karma. Something I did in a previous life now has me in a position where I need to suffer for it. It's necessary. It's the only way I can purge myself of whatever I did in a past life, and it's the only way I can move on to the next level towards the ultimate goal. Maybe getting a little better of a position in the next life. Do you ever wonder why you never see Hinduism or Buddhism or any religions affiliated with these produce any charities? Picture the scenario, right? Let's say I'm a Buddhist. Let's say I'm on lunch hour at work. Okay, I hold to the law of karma as being true. A man comes up to me on the street. He's homeless, he's dirty, he's tired, he's starving. A $5 bill would go a long way in his world, right? So he asked me for money so he can get a sandwich. Now what should I do? If I'm a Christian, I say this man's a human being made in the image and likeness of God, and I would take care of him if I had the means. But if I'm a Buddhist, I have to hold to the teachings of Buddhism and see that man the way Buddhism teaches me to see him. And that's obviously, he messed up pretty badly in a previous life. That's why he's suffering for it right now. This suffering is necessary. It's so necessary that if I relieve any of it, I'm interfering with his working out of his own karma. That means he's going to have to suffer for it later. His ultimate enlightenment then is going to be postponed. And that postponement's going to be my fault. So sorry, no sandwich. Starve. It's what's best for you in the long run. And who runs the soup kitchens? Who runs the shelters? Christians. Buddhism teaches that to alleviate suffering is to interfere with the soul's cultivation, to interfere with the working out of the karma on the path towards ultimate enlightenment, and none of them wants to do that. All of this talk about karma brings to my mind Hebrews chapter 9, verse 27, in which it says, "And insomuch as it is appointed for men to die once, and after this comes judgment." Now it seems to me that if I were Satan, or one of the demons who work for Satan, one of the best deceptions that I could possibly concoct would be one in which people are tricked into believing the opposite of this verse, where it says we live and we die once. I'd say, you know what, you get more than one life. Where it says there's a day of judgment, I'd say, you know what, there is no judgment. Instead, you get a limitless number of opportunities to get it right. If down through the ages, this teaching has suckered even one person into going on cruise control, into taking this life less seriously because there's going to be other lives and other opportunities to get it right, then I'm afraid this deadly dogma called karma has done its job. If time permitted, I could go on and on about how different Buddhism is from Christianity, how the two conflict and why they're incompatible. But hopefully from what's been said up to this point, you've gotten at least an introductory taste of it. Enough anyway for us to move on. So Britt's basically saying in a nutshell, look Tiger, if you want to spiritually recover from the setback, a change in religious world and life view is in order. I urge you to become a Christian. Get rid of the erroneous and self-centered Buddhism and experience a changed mind, a changed heart, a changed attitude, a changed mentality, and a changed lifestyle. Because you're such a visible guy and so famous, the world is going to see the changed man. And it'll be a powerful testimonial for Christianity on a world stage.
Tiger, turn to the Christian faith, and you can make a total recovery and be a great example to the world.
There's nothing wrong with Britt making this appeal. There's nothing deviant here. There's no theological mistakes. There's no philosophical absurdities. He spoke the truth. And he said the same thing that Christianity's been saying for 2,000 years. Anyone who personally knows me knows that I'm the most critical and difficult to satisfy jerk alive. I'm an impatient man when it comes to truth and error. And someone who knows me right now is shaking their head and saying, yep, he is. So I'll tell you this, if there was a problem with what Britt said, if anyone would be all over it, it would be me. but there's not. It was done in a spirit of love and with an attitude of sensitivity and gentleness. And if I can say so, he did it maybe even more than I could do myself when it comes to how nice he was about it. I'm going to say this much. Britt did his job as a Christian. Keith Olbermann's very next word out of his mouth is very revealing, because he goes, oh, wow.
Wow.
Now, if I say wow, that means I just saw something that's a little shocking. But if I say wow with an exclamation point on the end, maybe it's in all caps, that means that I really saw something that disagrees with everything that I think could really happen. Like I saw an amazing catch by Randy Moss, and it defied gravity. And based on everything I know about the laws of gravity, there's no way that catch should have been made. Or there's no way Michael Jackson should have been able to do that dance move, because it defies everything that I know to be true. Wow. But when you go, wow.
Wow.
That means you saw something so flabbergasting and so in opposition to everything that you feel is normal that it absolutely boggles your mind. Here's the real thing. Britt Hume put forth the classic evangelical Protestant position about Buddhism, and he also stated plainly, look, I invite you to drop that and come to the gospel, which is what mainstream normal Christians have been doing since the very church began. So if you hear the classic Protestant Christian behavior and speech being done, and being done in a very nice, gentle way, and your response is, oh, wow.
Wow.
What does that say about your spiritual condition? We can only assume that Keith Olbermann, when it comes to spiritual matters, he's absolutely gone. He's appalled at what he calls Hume's attempt to inject religion into a discussion of the Woods mess.
Hume's attempt to inject religion into a discussion of the Woods mess,
as well as then setting one religion as superior to and more forgiving than another.
and then setting one religion as superior and more forgiving to another, even...
I want you to notice his little slip-up. I'm doing him the courtesy of cleaning up his grammatical mistake as he misread his teleprompter. For normal people, I wouldn't do that, but since he always views himself as so much more intelligent than the rest of us, I thought it would be interesting to point it out. He is human, and he makes mistakes, even though he doesn't view himself that way. Anyways, what's clear here is that he doesn't feel religion should come up at all.
Hume's attempt to inject religion...
Thus, everyone's TV show, everyone's commentary should conform to Olbermann's prejudices about what he thinks they should or should not contain. I would say that this is a ridiculous arrogance, and I also want to point out that he doesn't believe it enough to live it himself. If you should not inject religion into your commentary, then Olbermann needs to sit down and shut up. He needs to disconnect his show at this point, because this whole segment is nothing but his attempt to teach and to get others to accept his views on religion. Coming against someone's freedom to inject religion into a discussion, saying those very words is actually you injecting your religion into the discussion. You see, you hold to a view of religion which says that religion should not be publicly discussed. And you're also trying to get other people to agree with and accept your view of religion, that it should not be discussed in public. It doesn't get much more self-refuting, and it doesn't get much more hypocritical than that. Being upset that someone is then setting one religion as superior to and more forgiving than another,
and then setting one religion as superior and more forgiving to another, even got a...
And again, correcting his little foul-up and his little reading problem with his teleprompter. The only way a person could be upset about that is if you hold to a position on religion which teaches that all religions are equally valid, equally true, and equally forgiving. Of course, what is this? This is a one-world ecumenical mentality. It is by definition what? A religious worldview. So let me ask you this. How could the man who hates the First Amendment, who hates free speech, who hates freedom of religion as violently and with as much passion as he does, possibly try to use it when it's convenient for him, specifically to intimidate Britt Hume with it, and also to try to cram it down his viewers' throats? Again, this is just another hypocritical example of a political and a religious leftist trying to force rules onto the rest of us that they themselves refuse to follow. But as we move on in the segment, we can see that Olbermann has come prepared. Should there be any humanoids out there in TV land who think for themselves, who examine evidence and who come to conclusions independently, who don't need him to tell them what they should or should not believe. He's brought out the authorities to back him up. First of all, a quote from the original nappy-headed hoe himself, Don Imus.
Got a mention from Don Imus on the Fox Out of Business channel, quoting, "Well, we checked this morning, and unfortunately, or perhaps fortunately, if you're a Buddhist, there is a path to recovery and redemption," right? Well, yes, there is. The idea of redemption, nirvana under Buddhism, is achieving the state of being freed from greed, hate, and delusion.
Imus may be on TV and radio. He may do some charity work for kids. But it's pretty universally recognized that he needs to seriously re-examine his position on race relations before being expected to be received as someone worth listening to. I don't think Keith Olbermann and myself disagree on this. And I know what he's trying to say by bringing out Don Imus.
Wow, when the brakes of political correctness are applied on you by Don Imus, you're in trouble. But
He's basically saying, look, if someone's so far gone as Don Imus is telling you that your views are too extreme, then you're in a real tough place and you need to take a second look. Olbermann's trying to make his audience think that Brit Hume's speaking the truth about Buddhism and Christianity is not only as bad as Don Imus's racist statements about a women's basketball team, but they're worse. He's saying that even a racist can see how out of touch you are, Brit. The preaching of the gospel, of course, is now being viewed as being on the same level as partisanship, on the same level as salesmanship, and now it's on the same level as racism. The bad news for Olbermann is that he's unoriginal. He's not the first one to try to make Christianity seem racist, nor is he going to be the last. So no one's impressed by his borrowed and recycled arguments that he pulled out of the trash can. But I want you to notice this. Olbermann's attempted smear of mainstream Protestant evangelical Christianity, it's dependent on the credibility of Don Imus. Whether or not Don Imus is an authority on religion worth listening to is the crux of Olbermann's case here. And I can't really speak for you, but in my own view, the word of Don Imus doesn't mean a whole lot to me. Now, his statement does affirm that he at least did a little reading, and it shows that what he learned is what we've already said here about what Buddhism claims for itself. But in terms of the weight of his name or his authority on issues of truth, I doubt that down the road next month or whatever, you're going to hear any statements or any accounts of people saying, you know what, I thought Buddhism was a false religion, didn't understand it, but then, praised be Siddhartha Gautama or whoever, Don Imus opened my eyes and his comments made me see the truth, and I converted, and I'm now a follower of Buddhism. You're not going to hear that. But second of all, Olbermann pulls out the other authority to back up the position that he's trying to sell to his audience.
let's bring in activist Dan Savage off.
Since it's been a religious discussion up to this point, you're probably thinking, oh, he should have got a Christian minister. Or maybe since he's dealing with freedom of religion and freedom of speech issues, perhaps he would have went out and got an authority on the U.S. Constitution. Or if neither of these, surely he went to maybe an atheist or a humanist or skeptic organization, maybe the ACLU, get at least someone qualified in this area to tell us why the American people deserve atheism, agnosticism, religious relativism, ecumenism, or communism forced onto us from a possible government-operated media complex in the future. Right? That seems to be the logical place that this discussion is heading up to this point. But he went and got none of these. He got Dan Savage.
Which author of The Commitment, Love, Sex, Marriage, and My Family.
In the Twin Cities, Minnesota, Minneapolis, we have a publication, and it's called The City Pages. Some of you who are listening to this, who are from Minneapolis, you're probably familiar with it. Now, it's a good publication if you want to know what concerts are coming, what comedy acts are getting set to pass through the town. It's also got a filthy side to it because you got to pass up ads where prostitutes try to sell you their services. You also have to tolerate a column which is called Savage Love. It doesn't just appear in Minneapolis in our city pages. I'm pretty sure that other publications probably pick it up all over the country. It's a sex advice column, but it's not a normal advice column. It's so extreme that a lot of people up here feel that some of the letters that are written into the columnist, they might be planted, they might be staged, they might be fake.
A radical sex advice columnist faggot.
Or some of the stuff's probably really happening out there. I wouldn't be surprised, but you probably hear something like, Dear Savage Love, my lover and I don't know, we're Having trouble keeping the excitement alive in our sex lives. We want to spice it up. We're considering throwing a midget into the bed with us to get a little three-way action going. Any thoughts? And they sign it with some weird name like possible future midget screwer or something, right? So then Savage is going to write back, dear possible future midget screwer. Actually, he'll abbreviate it to PFMS. So he'll say, dear PFMS, yes, I agree. One of the only ways to keep the spark alive in a monogamous relationship and not die of boredom is to involve an animal or a plant or a child or a transvestite, something along those lines. I think a midget will work great. But just make sure you dress the midget in all leather, including a leather mask, just like the Gimp from Pulp Fiction. Try to get ceiling mirrors installed. Try to get a flying trapeze swing installed as well. Without all of these extras, you're doomed to a life of monogamous boredom. This column sounds like something right out of the Sodom and Gomorrah times. It's nasty and it's filthy. And there's some other stuff in there that I could not repeat to you. That would be too horrible to put on a Christian talk show, or even a non-Christian talk show where normal people are listening to it. It's just radical, out there, nutcase stuff.
Radical sex advice columnist faggots.
Someone should be locked up who believes stuff like this. It's really filthy, nasty, deviant, perverted. Even Alfred Kinsey, who's burning in hell right now, would be saying, dang, that's some filthy stuff. This is the kind of person Keith Olbermann goes to for a discussion about religion. Why? On this show, if I'm having a panel discussion about brain surgery and about the effects of brain surgery, I might bring on a brain surgeon. I might bring on a student of brain surgery who hasn't actually done one but who knows all of the theories behind it. I might bring on, a neuroscientist who knows the after effects that the brain surgery would have on body functionality. But I wouldn't go to a dentist. What the heck is he going to bring to the table? Nothing. He's from an unrelated area. So Olbermann is bringing someone from an unrelated area who's going to commentate outside of their area of expertise. Why? Because this person agrees with the position that Olbermann is trying to put forth and is going to help it along. There's probably some gullible people out there who will say, wow, Dan Savage, he said it, so it must be true. Because that's what Olbermann's counting on. So just when the viewer is watching this train wreck, and they're thinking in their mind that this segment of Countdown, Olbermann's show, it can't possibly sink any lower. It can't possibly become any more intellectually bankrupt. It can't possibly miss the mark any further. His interview with Savage drives the nail into the coffin, and it drags the discussion down into the 10th level of hell. Any hopes that the viewer had for a breath of fresh air, those have been squashed. Now, I'll give you this much. Olbermann has the right to begin from wherever he wants to start from. I give him that much. And he does. He says, being a Christian is the best religion for adulterers because you can be forgiven.
Let me start with the premise. Being Christian is the best religion for adulterers because you can be forgiven.
Yes, Christianity is the best religion for adulterers. It's the best religion for murderers. It's the best religion for the scum of society, for all of the worst people. It is the best religion because it is the religion that the God who created humankind has revealed. And he revealed it as the only way that fallen humankind can be made whole. The only way we can be made clean. The only way we can be made right in his sight. Not based on anything that we do, but based on what Jesus Christ did on our behalf on the cross. In kind of a weird sense, I get a vibe that Olbermann actually gets it. He gets that being a Christian is the best religion for adulterers because you can be forgiven.
Being Christian is the best religion for adulterers because you can be forgiven.
It's the best religion for anyone because you can be forgiven. So he gets it, but he can barely contain his anti-Christian bigotry and his hatred. He's really losing it. He's so hostile, so rebellious, and so nasty that since he cannot attack God because God is invisible, he exists in heaven, outside of time and space in the universe that we know about. Since he can't attack God, what does he do? What's the next best thing? He attacks God's ambassadors and God's spokespeople right here on the earth. This is how it's always been. This is the price that proclaimers of truth have always paid for our boldness down through the ages. Every generation of Christians has had to do it, and our generation is not exempt. The church has been dealing with Keith Olbermann's. We've been dealing with Dan Savage's in every generation, going back 2,000 years. And before that, the Old Testament prophets had to deal with it as well. Yet what happens to all these people? They die. They're forgotten about. Their life's work signifying nothing. What happens to the church? What happens to the religion that they try to attack? It keeps right on rolling, and it keeps on advancing. So Olbermann, I challenge you. Go ahead and ask us if we're intimidated. Ask us if we're afraid. Ask us if we're going to bow down and shut our mouths just because you've asked us to. We're proud to come from a heritage that is faced in every century of the church age. We've always faced the tyrant's brandished steel. We have always faced the lion's gory mane. We have always faced the fires of 1,000 deaths, and we were proud to do it for Christianity. So believe me when I tell you this, your show has made zero impact against the advancement of the Christian message across the earth. In fact, you've done the opposite because you've provided motivation, you've provided drive and fire and passion to tons of Brit Humes out there. You've also given Brit Hume a bunch of advertising because I never heard of him before you brought him up. So I know how much you hate advertising and selling anything, but you done advertised and sold me his commentary in his show. I'm sure book sales and things like that for him are increasing quite nicely, and you've done that. As it stands now, based on where technology is in 2010, an audio CD can only hold 80 minutes of information, and I'm showing that we're approaching 73. Maybe if I do some fancy editing, I can have this moment down to 69 or 70 minutes on the final product. But the point is that we're running out of time. I've got to wrap it up. The segment of Olbermann's show has the rest of his and Savage's attempt at a discussion. I've already played it for you in its entirety. You can rewind it to your heart's content as these two share a brain and flap their lips about a subject in which they're clearly out of their league. The discussion degenerates. No light is shed whatsoever. Savage says it's hilarious that Brit Hume on Fox News suggesting that adulterous straight men should be Christians, not because Jesus is the way and the light, not because Jesus is the Son of God, not because it's the one true religion, but because it offers you the best deal. It gives you the get-out-of-jail-free card that other religions just can't.
What's hilarious about it is there's Brit Hume on Fox News suggesting that people should be Christians or adulterous straight men should be Christians, not because Jesus is the way and the light, not because Jesus is the Son of God, not because it is the one true religion, but because it offers the best deal. It gives you the get-out-of-adultery-free card that other religions just can't.
He's an idiot because Brit's saying that Tiger should leave Buddhism for Christianity. What do you think that is? The reasons why he's making the appeal, they have to do with Jesus being the way and the life. They have to do with Jesus being the Son of God. They have to do with Christianity being the one true religion. When he urged Tiger to convert to the Christian faith, all of these things are what that faith is and why it's superior to Buddhism. It gives you things Buddhism cannot offer. And that it offers forgiveness for adultery is not a negative thing, it's a positive thing. For the Christian, it's good news that adultery was paid for by Jesus Christ on the cross 2,000 years ago. Because for the Buddhist, they're going to pay for adultery themselves in hell for all eternity. Savage calls the teachings of Christianity an insult to Christianity.
That seems like an insult to Christianity.
This leads me to believe that he more than likely has a very flawed misunderstanding of what Christianity actually is and what it stands for. That Olbermann tries to sell us on some hypersensitive, wussy-girly view of it being wrong to discuss religion in public. He tries to sell us on this being a good idea.
Isn't this the classic thing that your mother probably also pointed out to you about never discussing religion in public? I mean, you can discuss religion in public. It's like this, you're not supposed to do it. This crosses that principle. Keep religious advocacy out of public life.
Two things about that. A, if you believe in basic human rights, this is very scary. B, saying it's wrong to discuss religion publicly and making the statement on national cable television is indeed bringing religious advocacy into public life. Once again, if Olbermann truly believes that religion does not belong in public discussion, then he needs to stop publicly discussing religion, just like he's doing on a show. He calls Brit Hume a person who doesn't understand his own religion and doesn't know someone else's religion.
Guys who don't know their own religions or somebody else's religion, like Brit Hume.
As we've seen, Brit spoke the Christian truth about this issue and had the courage and the backbone to offer Tiger Woods the gospel, and he did it in a very gentle way. I've been involved in Christian evangelism and ministry for well over a decade, and I've done so in neighborhoods that would scare the life out of both Olbermann and Savage. And as a minister, based on everything I know and everything I've studied, I, for one, stand behind Britt on this. I think he spoke the truth. As for him not understanding someone else's religion, we've already seen, number one, Britt said very little about Buddhism, and what he did say was accurate. I've studied Buddhism, and I know exactly what's going on with it. Buddhism offers a way, but it offers the wrong way. Savage asks, where are the moderate Christians when something like this happens? Why don't they speak up in defense of their own faith?
Where are the moderate, liberal, progressive Christians when something like this happens? Why don't they speak up in defense of their own faith?
Well, Savage, I'm a mainstream evangelical Christian, and as you've requested, I'm speaking up in defense of my faith. But I'm going to tell you this, mainstream Christians don't see Britt Hume as an attacker against our faith, against whom we must defend it. We actually see you as the attacker, and also your boy Olbermann. You are the ones who are seeking to redefine us and remake a faith that pre-exists your birth by millennia into the image that you'd like it to be shaped in. And we've got news for you. We're not going to allow you to do it. He says that American Christianity has been hijacked by lunatics like Pat Robertson and Britt Hume.
American Christianity has been hijacked by the lunatics, by the Pat Robertsons, and by people like Britt Hume. And it's
hijacking is when someone from outside comes in and takes it into a direction other than where it was originally intended to go. But neither Britt Hume nor Pat Robertson are from outside of the Orthodox Christian faith. We view them as brothers. They're inside the faith, and they advance Christianity further in the direction in which it was already headed before their time on the scene. The only lunatic seeking to hijack our faith and make it into something that it is not is you and Olbermann, Savage. Next, Olbermann vomits out the classic pro-gay acronym WWJDIHS.
WWJDIHS, which is what would Jesus do if he strayed?
The fact that it's even being considered that Christ was possibly gay in the so-called gay Christian movement, that is the lunatic hijacking. We see yet another shot at the advocacy of religion in public life.
Advocacy of religion in public life.
So he's advocating publicly for his religious view of no advocacy of religion in public. That's very brilliant. They say that exercising freedom of speech and freedom of religion needs to be checked. They say that it's got to stop. It's got to be de-escalated.
That needs to be checked. And we've got to stop. We've got to de-escalate this rhetoric and the rhetorical war pitting one religion against another.
So once again, someone, and possibly the government, although they never say, has to step in and tell both sides of the debate what they have the freedom to say and what verbiage or terminology is banned. All I'm going to tell you is if this kind of a view catches on, it's very frightening when you think about the future of America. And in case you don't get it, in case you haven't figured it out yet, Keith says yet again that people of faith should avoid public proselytizing. Most people of faith are stupid, but there are some smart ones. The ones who hold Olbermann's view and keep their mouths shut.
Is it not in the interest of people of faith to avoid this kind of public proselytizing? I mean, the smart ones get that it just makes them look bad.
Those who disobey Olbermann's view and exercise their rights, they look bad. So none of you idiots who are Christians out there like myself, we ought not dare to exercise freedom of religion or freedom of speech. If you do, according to Keith Olbermann, you're stupid. They go on to say that smart people of faith don't go on Fox News and bloviate and lecture other people and hector people, but they're
smart people of faith don't go on Fox News and bloviate and lecture other people and hector people.
But they're saying it on MSNBC in the middle of bloviating and lecturing and hectoring people. They talk about the number of times Hume has been married as though that has some logical relationship to the topic at hand.
You know, Britt Hume is on his second marriage. Britt Hume really isn't in a position to be lecturing.
The truth of the matter is, even if he's been married 8 times, and if he's been to jail and all of that stuff, these things about him personally don't affect the factual accuracy or inaccuracy of what he said. It's cheap, it's an argumentum ad hominem to go for the personality rather than sticking to the facts of the debate. They say that Britt has never been a Buddhist, as though experience is the acid test that determines whether or not a person qualifies to even talk about a subject.
I don't think Britt Hume used to be a Buddhist who then converted to some Christian faith.
But which of them has ever been a political or religious conservative? They have no life experience as being in either of these things, yet they make a living talking about these things. by their own standards that they themselves have just set for other people, applying it to themselves, they are now disqualified from having their shows. To quote Vinny Gambini in My Cousin Vinny, the Joe Pesci character, when it was his turn to give an opening statement, he said everything that guy just said was bullcrap. I hope you can see it. We're out of time. This has been Saturday, January the 30th, 2010.